Welcome to Monster Monday's double feature. So I am going to break these into two videos because I have a lot to say about both, but let's talk about The Descent first, and then after I'll follow it up with The Descent Part 2. So, the first Descent, I want to say most people would agree it's a fantastic film and one of the best horror movies of the 2000s. Yeah, I mean, every film has its haters. I mean, there's no film that's void of this. In fact, I was just talking about that today in my group. I was like, what is a movie? What do you think the most universally liked movie? There's not ever going to be a movie where everyone likes it. But I had suggested Beetlejuice has got to be up there because it's super rare that I meet someone who doesn't at least like it. So, anyways, but of course, I'm sure I'll see some comments below. I don't like Beetlejuice. There is no film. There is no film that everybody loves. All right, so my experience with this movie, I got to see this in theater with my father. And let me tell you something about my father. He is as claustrophobic as they come. He can't, give you an idea of my father's claustrophobia. So, recently he got cancer. He beat it, so we're good. But he had to get scanned, and he could not go in the MRI. Just couldn't do it. So he had to book an appointment down in Phoenix. He lives up in the mountains, and he had to drive down to Phoenix, like a 2-hour drive, to go to this specialty place where they have this enormous one that gives him a lot of room inside. And when he got there, he had to take drugs to be able to even go in the one that's wide open. So him in this theater he didn't walk out. He didn't, he could have got up. He actually really enjoyed the movie, but he was covered in sweat when I looked over at him. He was so fucking terrified. And what was funny is I don't even think he knew it was a monster movie. So our first monster doesn't even come into this film until about 50 minutes in, and I think it's like the first glimpse, like a real quick thing, and then it's like 56 minutes before we actually get like an attack. And I've said this many times, and my dad definitely would agree. This movie doesn't even need the monsters. It's absolutely terrifying before the monsters even show up. Like, the whole movie could have just been them trying to get out of there, and it would have been almost as scary. Now, you throw monsters into this situation, you throw these creatures in here, yes, of course, it's going to amplify things, no doubt about it. But I almost feel like they make it a little less scary in a way. I know that sounds crazy, but like, my brain trying to push myself to go through the caverns and the mazes and this and that, I would be so in my head about it, I wouldn't be able to function almost. I just wouldn't be able to push myself. But if there was a fucking creature behind me that was like that and was chasing me, it would make my mind be like, all right, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And it would just force me through these tight squeeze holes and whatnot. So I feel like they'd help me in a way, weirdly. But I wouldn't want them there. I wouldn't want this situation. This is terrifying. Don't go spelunking. Absolutely terrible idea. So anyway, I'm sure there's people out there who like it and this and that, but it ain't for me. That's all I'm saying. So it's your thing, go for it, but you ain't never finding my ass in no caves like this. Absolutely not. All right, so we start the movie with some white water rafting, which anytime I see that, I always think of the movie The River Wild with Meryl Streep, Kevin Bacon, John C. Reilly. Good film, man. Never gets talked about, though. And then they're in the car, so Sarah and her husband and her kid are in the car, and they're driving, and, she's like, you're being distant, which essentially, I mean, we can kind of assume here this is him either, wanting to split up, or we don't know what exactly is all going to happen, but he's clearly having an affair with Juno. Now, even in the second one, it's never 100% confirmed by Juno that's what's happening. It's just assumed by Sarah, and it's kind of just an unsaid thing when they look at each other like, oh shit, So yes, we can take it as fact, but for me, I'm like, it's never 100% confirmed, but it happened, right? I mean, we got to agree it happened. But yeah, she's just like, you're being distant, and then boom. I mean, and that's just it, man. It's wild how fast something can happen like that. You can just be driving and you're talking, and then boom, just like you don't see it happen, nothing, and you're just dead instant. Like, which, in my opinion, is better than just sitting there and dying for like hours, bleeding out and screaming in agony and stuff like that. So, you know, probably best that happened, but for her husband and her son daughter to be impaled, it really makes you realize when stuff like that happens how inconsequential the little shit is. Like, take the Juno affair for instance. Is it really all that big of a deal in comparison to the death of him and his daughter? Like, when it comes down to moments like that, you're just, if you were to have those moments back, you would just be like, I know it's terrible, but I want to be with Juno, or I don't want to be with you anymore. Who knows? We don't know if he even liked Juno. He might have just been fucking her to give himself an excuse to get out of there or whatever. But Juno seemed to be really into him, for what we can tell, just reading body language. But yeah, it's just those moments when you watch these kinds of movies and someone just dies so suddenly like that. And then when Sarah wakes up in the hospital and she's running around and Juno catches her and they're crying in the hospital, and it's just like, everything else is just so, it just pales in comparison to something actual that matters like this. So, I don't know. I know a horror movie and this and that, it's not supposed to give you those kinds of emotions, but this one does, because the acting is great and there's some seriously emotional sequences. But yeah, it just got me thinking about it, especially just the death of her kid in the back seat and how it's just kind of keeps replaying in her head, and just so sad. All right, so then we move on to a year later, and in the Appalachian Mountains, and Sarah is meeting up with Juno and 4 other women to go spelunking, and of course all freaking 6 of them are beautiful women. And I like their banter back and forth. We get to know them, we get to like them. They're good characters. They're very believable as friends, and the new one who's come into the group seems to blend well, and there's a good sense of friendship and all that stuff there. So anyone who's like, oh, come on, get on with it, it's not that long, and it's good stuff. And then they take that photograph, and that's like their last known photograph. And even if you count the second one, which some people don't, we'll get into that. I'm not going to talk about the second one right now, but yeah, it's ominous, man. It's just ominous, because have you ever looked at someone's last known photograph and you're just like, they had no idea. Like, they had no idea what was about to happen to them. Like, they had no idea that when they took this photo, it'd be the last photo they ever took. It's fucking grim. It's a dark thing to think about. But in that moment, you know that, being a horror movie, that at least most of these girls in this picture, this is the last picture they'll ever take. Now, they are on footage, so they do some video beyond that, but that's the last photo. And the way it's shot and the way it's shown, and then they showed at the very end, it's just ominous, and I really dig that. It's subtle little things like that, but it adds to the film for me. And okay, so a line I use from this film all the fucking time is when all the bats fly out and she's filming and she's like, 1 bat, 2 bat, 50 bat, oh. I do that shit. Oh my God, I say that line so fucking often. When people are counting or whatever, I always come in with the 50 bat, oh. And people never one time in probably the hundreds of times I've used it now, has anyone been like, oh, Descent. There was like, oh, fucking Sesame Street, The Count, obviously. But no one's ever guessed this with the 50 bat. Love that line. I'm surprised Sarah would drive so recklessly, because I got in a car wreck, a really, really bad one, man, and I was a fucking mess for years. But, I mean, this is a girl who's already an adrenaline junkie at heart, and I didn't have my daughter and my husband die. At that point, she didn't know Juno was having an affair. Not that I think that anyone should die for cheating. I think that's a seriously harsh penalty for having an affair, because anytime there's an affair, there's more going on than just the guy or the girl did something fucked up behind the other person's back. Like, there's underlying issues that the other person is just outright ignoring. I don't think that there's ever been I mean, of course, okay, that's a little hyperbolic, but I feel like it's probably extremely rare when someone cheats and the other person is genuinely shocked. Like, if they were to be completely honest with themselves. Like, there was no sign at all. None. Zero. We were perfect. It does occur, I have no doubt. But for the most part, I think if you're really being honest with yourself and you're paying attention, it doesn't fully come out of nowhere. It's like, okay, like, I'm being honest. But as I said, like, at this point, Sarah is not aware of the affair. So in her head, she lost her husband. Yes, they might have been in rough times at that time, but fuck, plenty of couples go through shit. All of them. And she lost her daughter. So she has probably a death wish in a way. Like, I don't give a fuck. She was an adrenaline junkie before, and she had a reason to live. Now she has no reason to live. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that she's driving so recklessly, but because of my own experience with it, I don't know. I saw that, but now that I'm talking about it, I didn't even think about it until then, but there you go. And I'll tell you this, man, this is one sport that if you consider fucking cave diving or spelunking, which I learned from Batman Begins. Right before this, I didn't even know what the hell it was until I heard about that. Expecting to find much gunfire while cave diving or whatever. Fucking Lucius Fox, great movie. Batman Begins, one of the best. Still my favorite Batman movie. But yeah, if you consider this a sport or whatever you want to call it, this is definitely one that is only for skinny people. Could you imagine? I mean, you really couldn't be a fucking spelunker. I mean, the smaller you are, the better. Now, of course, you're going to have some muscle mass to be able to climb up and out of things. So you're not going to be able to just be a rail. So you'll have to have something on your frame. But obviously, the smaller you can be, the most compact muscle you can possibly have, that's it. I was watching this and I was like, dude, if these girls had even an extra pound on them, they wouldn't be able to get through there. All right, so then we have Sarah who gets stuck and she starts hyperventilating, which I guess kind of takes away. I mean, fear is fear. Even if you have a death wish, man, getting stuck, that's not the way you want to die, is just being stuck in some cavern. Oh man, when she comes back and she goes back for her and she's talking to her and she's just like, tells her the freaking lemon joke, which I actually had to turn on the subtitles for and rewind it because I didn't think the punchline was given and I couldn't hear what it said. And I thought she said, how do you give an elephant an orgasm? And it's, how do you give a lemon an orgasm? You put your fingers in its citrus, or you something like that. I thought it was going to be one of those Breakfast Club scenarios where you never got to hear the punchline of the joke he's saying up in the frickin' rafters when he's walking. He breaks through. And, oh shit! And I've actually looked that up online to see, and there's an interview with them or something, and they're like, oh yeah, there was never a punchline for that joke. And that broke my heart, because I always thought I was going to find the punchline to that joke. And it doesn't exist. It was just something he said on the spot, and it really had no punchline, so they cut it short, which is kind of a bummer. Thinking about, or watching these and thinking about what could happen in these scenarios, and like an earthquake. I mean, if you're spelunking and an earthquake happens, you're fucked. You're fucked. That just no way, man. No effing way. But then it starts collapsing and it like moves a little bit, which is kind of weird to me because she's already stuck in the space that it is, and then it comes down even more. I feel like she'd be fucked. She'd be stuck 100%. Like, moving down actually freed her up to go. I don't even know how she got stuck. Was her foot stuck? Was like what was stuck? So it kind of doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't really care. Then they find out no one's coming because Juno took them into a different cave system. Now I watched, or listened, should I say, to the Exploding Heads horror movie podcast on this. They reviewed a whole bunch of stuff, but they did this, and this is what prompted this desire to cover this for the Monster Monday here. And they were Christian had pointed out, like, why didn't anyone ever, like, how did Juno know about this, and how was there no one had ever reported, no one had ever come back and had charted it and blah blah blah. And I was like, because everyone who went down there died. I think it's a pretty simple answer, but I had to think about it while I was watching the movie. It's like, I don't know. And then I'm thinking, and I'm looking at the stuff, and I'm like, well, because anyone who ever went down there died. But I have some other thoughts on this as well. We'll get to. Hopefully, I remember. Sometimes I get way off track and fucking forget shit. They lose like half their supplies in that fall because Sarah was bringing some and dropped them. Or the other chick was, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, but they lose the supplies, which is just terrifying, and as I said, they find out no one is coming. No one knows where they're at, and that is screwed up. Then they get to the little chasm there, which, okay, so here, okay, this is where I get to talk about this. I did remember. Okay, so they're in that space, and they have to figure out a way, and so there's a natural rock wall they break through to get down to that little ledge that goes across the chasm. And then when they're climbing across, they find an anchor point. And I was like, so then how did the people who put that anchor point in get through that rock wall without breaking it? Because it's a natural wall. It's not like it's going to repair itself. And they went down to that chasm. I was like, that's a fucking flaw. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's two entrances. They came in on the other entrance. And then, which, if true, is really sad, because that means that they were crossing that chasm. They were going to get up to that pass, break through that rock wall, and they were almost out. So whoever that old 100-year-old team was right at the end of their journey. Which then, because I was talking to Brandon from Exploding Heads about this, and I was like, dude, you know what would be dope is if they made a prequel set 100 years ago of the original, crew that came in. And I was like, it'd be cool if they were like archaeologists and they found like cave paintings, because they find cave paintings. Who put those cave paintings in there? So what I am assuming, what I'm going to take from this, is that these are essentially what happened to Neanderthals or something like that. They like went into the caves. They're like cave dwellers. Hey, shout out to Mystery Science Theater 3000. No Ator in this one, though. Or Thong. What a dumb name. But yeah, so I'm guessing that they went underground, right? So say some cave dwellers went underground and then they were in there, because it would take a long, long time to evolve, or if they were human, they were fucking devolved. But whichever way you want to go, it would take a long time. I mean, we're talking Gollum shit here, man, where it takes freaking thousands of years for this, for him to change from Smeagol to Gollum into this creature, which, of course, this is what they remind me of the most, which is Gollum. They have a very similar look. But yeah, I like the idea. They go in there to investigate these cave paintings, and then they're down there, and then they find them kind of right at the end, because they find those cave paintings like right after they get across that chasm. Oh, and that chick fucking cuts her hand holding onto the rope as it slides through. Oh, that is so brutal, man. That is so brutal. Poor Becca on that. Juno goes across for all the anchors. She tries to be the hero there, and she kind of fucks her. Juno kind of fucks everybody in this movie, including Sarah's husband. But I don't feel like Juno means like to be the shit that she is, but there's so many terrible, questionable decisions she makes. She fucks her best friend's husband. She, hits the girl in the throat, which wasn't her fault, but she also left her behind to die. But at the same time, it's like, I get it. Like, what's she gonna do? That girl's fucked. There's no way you're getting that girl out of there. Now, she could have put her out of her misery. That probably would have been the best way. But killing your friend, even though you've already technically killed your friend, would be easier said than done. And we don't know the situation with Juno and the husband. I mean, who fucking knows what happens? There's always, three sides to every story. His side, her side, and the truth, right? So who knows what the hell was going on there. But anyway, poor Becca's hand. Holy shit, man. It's just... I'm trying to remember... No, I'm not going to get... I'm trying to remember another scene like that where somebody's hand gets ripped apart by a rope. It's in my head right now, but I'm forgetting what movie it is. And does Juno mean that those anchors in the thing are literally 100 years old? Or is she saying, like, is she exaggerating? Like, shit, these things are 100 years old, like, when they're really, like, 20 or 30 years old. I don't know much about climbing gear, so I don't know what those anchor points, like, what would those date those if you saw those? Like, what era were those used during? I'm taking it as literal. I think they're, like, literally 100 years old, so... it would be cool to see a period piece set in like the early 1900s of guys exploring those caves. Great. Oh man, please make a prequel to this. That would be badass. And then Holly, poor Holly too, she runs for the light, and then she finds out it's just phosphorus in the rock, but she falls down this hole and breaks her leg. And then the setting of the bone scene is brutal to watch. She's just sitting there and she's grabbing it, and it's gnarly, man. It's great stuff. And this is before like a fucking single monster has even been seen, I think, right? That's crazy. And then, is there anybody there? That happens after that. So this is that iconic scene. There's a couple iconic scenes in this, and I think is there anybody there? And she's like looking around with the camera, and then it's just sitting right next to the chick. That's a great moment. Really good scare. And then Juno is a badass, man. Not only in this one, but in the second one. And she fucks one of those things up and then accidentally hits Beth in the throat. Oh, that sucks so bad. Anytime that ever happens in a movie, I'm like, oh, that's not fair. That sucks. It's so easy that could happen. I mean, if you're just going hog wild, man, friendly fire is a real, that's why you've got to check your aim. That's why you've got to freaking stay in line. That's why you got to, do it as a unit. Like, and you can in that moment. They're not trained soldiers. They're just fighting for their lives. And it's such a shame. She's a victim of circumstance there. It's not her fault. But leaving her behind, I guess, technically is her fault. But what would you do? Would you 100% for sure stay behind with her? Would you put her out of her misery? What would you do? I mean, I don't know. So I can't really give her shit. Why do these creatures have a heightened sense of smell as well? I would feel like all of their senses would be extremely heightened, and I feel like they should be able to smell these girls, but maybe not. I don't know. Once they appear, though, it's like 56 minutes in before they're actually like attacking. It never lets up from there. Never once. They're chasing them the whole time. I love when Juno comes in, fucks that other one up, and then grabs it and breaks its neck. Badass, man. And then, Sarah goes and she finds out Juno killed Beth. And that's a bad moment because not only does she find out that she left her for dead, but that's in the moment where Beth like reveals to her the necklace that shows Sarah like she fucked your husband too. She killed me and she fucked your husband. Just so you know, go get her. So that's a really big moment in the movie. You probably shouldn't carry around a necklace with her husband's like motto, his mantra on it. But she loved him. I mean, she yells out like, "We all lost something in that wreck," and I mean, she clearly was in love with the guy. The pit of blood scene, I think, is the most iconic from the film. It's a good scene, and then when she's in there, another one comes up out of there. how long was it in there? How long can these things hold their breath? It just so happened to be chilling in there. Was it taking like a refreshing bloodbath? And then Sarah just happened to fall in there, and it was like, oh, I'm just going to take this opportunity to do some blood scuba diving. And then it just comes up out of it's a little too convenient. But hey, maybe, I don't know. Like, why is there so much blood there as well? Like, their den is up by the entrance or the exit or whatever you want to call it, and there's all the bones. Like, what's all the blood from? I don't know, but it's a cool shot, so I'm not gonna harp on it too much. Now, these things clearly had eyes at one point. They don't work anymore. How long would it take for something to evolve like that? Like, how many generations before you started to lose your sight, having been in the dark for so long? How long? Curious. But they keep coming to the surface to feed. So I feel like they would constantly keep seeing light. So I don't feel like they'd ever go blind. Like, all their hunting would still be out in the daylight or the nighttime. It's still some light from the moon and everything. So I don't feel like, if you never used your sight at all ever, then yeah, I guess if they were just down in those caverns and never came up. Now, maybe because something let them out, but there's cave drawings of 2 entrances. So they knew of both entrances in the cave painting days. So I don't see why they would ever lose their vision, but okay, I'm kind of taking the fun out of the movie. All right. And then the 2 chicks are killed back to back. One's hanging from the rope, and then Juno takes a leap and tries to grab, and then just has to do a leap of faith down into the water. Whew. And who made those arrows on the wall? Did I miss that? Were those from the other crew? Because if it's from the 100 years ago thing, then that definitely means they were on the other side, and proves my theory that they were at the end. They were coming that way. So did someone else make the arrows? I didn't see it. Maybe someone was scratching them, but I think those arrows are from the first settling team, which, as I said, proves my point. And I love that Sarah bites one of them back. That's great shit. I love any time where, a creature is biting somebody and then the human bites them back. Great stuff. The big fight at the end here is freaking great, man. Just really well staged, really well done. A little too much quick edit. I think Neil Marshall got out of control with that frantic high-pace editing. I would have liked longer takes on certain things, because I don't think anything lasts for longer than 1 second, and that can be a little jarring to me personally. And then there's the moment where she has, they could get out, and Juno turns around and they look at each other, and she pops down the necklace. Bitch, I know. And then she just pops her through the leg and leaves her for dead. And that wide shot of her climbing out of there, which, if you were to count the second one, is real, because that's exactly the same shot of the girl at the end of the second one. So, she couldn't have imagined that. But okay, so this is the original, or not the original. This is the unrated director's cut, or the unrated cut, or I don't know what that is. And then, so she's still in the cave at the end. We have the rebirthing scene where she's coming up out of the Earth's vagina, and then she runs out to the car, and then she's in her car, and there's Juno's in the backseat, and we realize she's still down in that cave. There's speculation and stuff going around. I had heard that people watch this movie with the idea that Sarah just lost her mind, and that the descent is her descent into madness, and she actually killed everyone in there. I think that's idiotic. I don't think there's a shred of evidence to support that claim. I think that's absolutely insane. From whatever, unless every single thing we were shown did not happen at all in any way, shape, or form the way it happened. Because in order to have those kinds of things make sense, Sarah would have had to be involved and around for every single death. And she would have had to have been fighting off the people, and then people could have been like, oh, well, what she was really doing here was she was hurting them instead. You would have to completely ignore the entire film to support that claim. So I think that's an insane claim. In fact, Neil Marshall supposedly said he doesn't have a huge issue with people viewing it in that direction. Maybe he's just like, I don't give a fuck, man. I got the paycheck. I'm a famous director. Whatever. Like, I think it's insane. I think it fucking makes zero sense. Like, there's plenty of movies I've watched where it's like, oh, could have been them. They could be crazy. This movie does not support that at all. Not one fucking bit in my mind. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's that. Let's move on to the second one.